Hi everybody, this is Gene here with another tutorial video for our Recursion Studio video synthesizer. The basic idea behind this tutorial is that I'm going to explain some of the screensaver settings and why you might want to use that. The general idea is that there are multiple circumstances in which you want the synth to run with minimal input. The major use cases being things like streaming, setting it up in a storefront, or just setting it up at a party or at home where you don't really want to be actively playing with it, but you still want content to be created. The basic idea is you don't need to actively control it, and it'll either load stuff from the library on its own or generate new content. The major thing to be aware of, though, when it generates new content, it uses the synth's randomization functions, and while it's somewhat intelligent in how that operates, there is some chance that it will create stuff that either looks bad or looks epileptic or like stroboscopic. So if you're using those randomization features, you need some degree of oversight. So the major division is whether you want absolutely no oversight or you are going to be there to actually like tweak it a little bit while it's running live. So first of all, the way you turn on the screensaver, easiest way is just to go to play and then start the screensaver. And you'll see that it's now kind of highlighted to let you know that it's on. And now it's going to be doing a combination of loading content from the library and generating new content. And that is all very configurable in the settings page under the screensaver subheading. So first of all, you need to turn the screensaver on, and there are basically two ways to do it. You can either do it manually via this button or on the play page, or you can have it auto start. So auto start will start the screensaver if nobody has interacted with the synth within this interval. So basically, if the synth is standing on its own for 2 minutes, then it'll start the screensaver. If this is 0, then this feature is disabled. If it's like 1, then it basically will always have the screensaver on. There's basically no way to turn it off in this configuration. So the reason you'd want to do this is if you are setting it up in a storefront, for instance, and you want somebody to come in or to be able to come in and actually fidget around with it, but when nobody's actively playing around with it, you want the screensaver to be on. That's also useful at like an event or a party where you're actually setting it up for people to mess around with, but if nobody's actively controlling it, you still want it to do something. So the next major settings you want to be aware of are, well, the first one, let's just do library load probability. So this is the most important one for kind of configuring how you want the screensaver to operate. So approximately every interval seconds, the screensaver is going to trigger an action. So you can configure how often it does something with this interval, and it kind of randomly chooses around that. So it's not exactly 30 seconds. But the way it's set up right now is every 30 seconds, it's going to do one of two things. It's either going to load something from the library, or it's going to try to generate some new content. So if we had library load probability 100%, that means that approximately every 30 seconds, it's just going to load something from the library. It's not going to try to randomly generate content on its own. This is useful if you absolutely do not want to have any interaction over it. Like if you are streaming and you just don't want to touch it, or if you're at some kind of event and you just can't risk it doing something on its own, then you want to turn this setting all the way up to 100%. By default, it's set to 10%, which I think is fairly reasonable. That means the other 90% of the time, it's going to try to generate new content. And the way it generates new content isn't purely random. It uses what's currently there as a starting point. And with this setting at 25, it'll deviate 25% of the way from its current starting point to something completely new. So if you set this at 100%, then it's going to be completely random every single time it transitions. If you set it super low, then it's going to stick around where it originally was. The idea is these two settings kind of work in concert. So the idea is sporadically it will load something from the library, which is known to be good, and then it'll use the randomness to kind of search around that general area. So it's going to stay close to the library. So these are the settings you want to play with if you're streaming or setting things up in a store. There's a few other settings to be aware of. Transition speed is how quickly it transitions between the various patches that it's generating or loading. Right now it's 8 beats, where beats is currently determined by the tempo of the audio. There's halt on interrupt, which can also be useful. So that means if the screensaver is on and somebody starts fudging around with it, if this is enabled, then it will stop the screensaver. See, now I just twiddled with the knob, which I guess you couldn't see because it's not in that view, and it turned the screensaver off. So screensaver's on, I'm going to turn a knob. Now the screensaver was turned off. So that way you can set it up as autonomous, but then when somebody starts playing around with it, they have now taken control. Disabled and create is a little more advanced. You probably don't want to play around with that yet. One thing you almost certainly do want to keep on, unless you know what you're doing, is auto map IO. So this will integrate control signals like CV and video and audio in with the screensaver. So basically, if you have this on and audio is plugged in, the screensaver will be audio reactive. If you have it off, then it will not be, unless it loads something from the library, which was inherently audio reactive. All right, so that is the basic idea behind the screensaver. It is actually, it works really well. The thing is, sometimes if it's very random, which basically you can simulate by just tapping random, sometimes it's just either going to look really bad or get kind of like stroby. And a lot of times, see, this isn't particularly great. A lot of times you can fix it with some mild tweaks. So you just zoom in, it actually gets a little bit better. Or you can just use random as like a skip, or you can just load another preset. So there are ways to kind of handle that if you don't want it just to load from the library. If you want it to actually create content, you can basically just tweak it while it's live. It doesn't take a lot of thought, but you do probably need a little bit of understanding of what you're doing. Or you can hook a MIDI button to just randomize as like a skip or something like that. So there are definitely a lot of options there. One last thing to know, so the next video is going to go over the tagging system in the library. But if you have tag filters enabled, the screensaver will respect that. So if you've gone in and tagged 50 presets that you like, and you have that one tag live, then the screensaver will only choose between those 50 presets. And that's useful at like a live performance where you want to use your presets, but you might not want to actually directly control it or something like that. All right, that is the overview of the screensaver and how you might want to use it for streaming and for setting things up in a shop. Stay tuned for the next video where I'll go over the library and tagging features of the synth.